Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. This is our Q&A series for February where you ask the questions and we come up with the answers. We've got some great questions this month about what else the GPU market. Will we see massive discounts on the RTX 3000 GPUs, or will we see high prices until the new GPUs launch? And AM4 versus AM5, should you be considering jumping over to AM5 for its new upgradability? We've also got great DDR5 memory questions. This price on DDR5 has dropped dramatically. Is it now time to kick DDR4 to the curb? Or is DDR5 just not something worth investing in? Remember, if you get value out of the video, give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel, especially this guy right here. And of course, subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. Before that, this video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows 10 licenses and that terrible Activate Windows 10 watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key, and get a Windows 10 Home or Pro OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 25% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom, you have a fully licensed Windows 10 for a crazy low price, which can be upgraded for free to Windows 11. Use the links in the video description below. Let's start off where else the GPU market, pricing and availability. Andrew Games asked a question I think is in a lot of people's minds right now, looking at market behavior worldwide. Do I think that the RTX 3000 series cards are going to get cheaper because retailers want to sell them out, or our price is going to stay high? I think what we're talking about here is RTX 3070, 3060 Ti, 3060, and the 3050. Those are the cards right now that are out there. Anything above that has effectively sold through the market. It's just ridiculous pricing at this point and has effectively been replaced by the 4070 Ti, which has the same performance as an RTX 3090. So let's take a look at pricing for those cards. Now, we did see huge decreases in 2022 across the board on all GPUs because we came out of the mining boom. Miners were no longer buying those cards. Those cards started to rot on shelves, and all of a sudden we went from like an RTX 3060 going for like on eBay for like $1,000 all the way drop down to where it is now, which is like $370, $380 up to $400. Yeah, but they've dropped to the levels that NVIDIA feels comfortable. Those cards still have never hit MSRP. Never hit MSRP. Let that sink in for a second. Most of those cards are not even close to their MSRP. Will they continue to drop, especially given the fact that AMD competitive cards like the RX 6650 XT, which actually outcompetes the 3060, by the way, can be had for like $249 right now. That Intel Arc A750, which by the way, the driver update, huge win for Intel, which I think is great news for the rest of the market. I'm super excited to see what they have for Battle Mage. A750, I would recommend that card right now, $250. NVIDIA is not competitive anywhere in their product stack right now for the RTX 3000 series cards, but they're still not going to reduce prices, and they've said as much. So I wouldn't hold out any kind of real hope. I'd take a look at their competitors. You want to see NVIDIA prices go down, start buying the competitors' card. I think we framed this conversation the wrong way a lot. What is it going to take for NVIDIA to reduce their price? It's going to take them losing a crap load of market share. It's not about whether or not they reduce their prices or AMD or Intel or whatever. It's about what's the best card for you right now. And honestly, if you've got $500 or less to spend on a GPU, the best cards for you are AMD or Intel right now. I wouldn't look at anything from NVIDIA really. Another great question from Volkeg. Do I think that NVIDIA and AMD are intentionally shorting the market supply to keep prices high? Well, honestly, it's not about what I think. They have publicly stated that they're doing that. Publicly stated. That is their current corporate strategy. So what happened during the mining boom is that they overproduced RTX 3000 series GPUs and RX 6000 series GPUs. Huge amounts they had in the pipeline, in the chain. And then mining basically died. Back in September, Ethereum went to proof of stake. GPU mining is completely gone at this point, and miners are actually in the process of dumping their GPUs. At the same time, they got left with this huge backlog of GPUs that had not yet hit the market. And NVIDIA basically said to its investors that in a shareholder call, this is public stuff, by the way, we are withholding the launch of new GPUs until the old ones sell out, and they're not going to reduce their prices. AMD recently released a statement, I think for their Q4 guidance, that they're undersupplying the market. Undersupplying the market. Yeah, that means we're shorting the market. That means we're intentionally withholding supply to keep prices high. They're not just talking about our 6000 series graphics cards, they're also talking about CPUs and other things like that. So yes, Do they do this? Absolutely. Can you imagine though? Imagine if Ford Motor Company said that they are going to intentionally withhold cars manufacturing from the market, sending new cars to the market in order to keep prices artificially high. What would happen? Toyota and Hyundai and all the other competitors out there, and there's quite a few, they would find a way to sell their cars at a lower price to meet the market. There would be supply and demand in there. That's what happens when you have a competitive market. The GPU market is so uncompetitive. It's so clearly uncompetitive that they're actually not even just doing this kind of underneath the table. They're actually giving public guidance to their shareholders that this is the activity that they're engaged in right now. It's anti-competitive. This is why we need Intel in the market. I'd love to get a lot of different partners involved right now and competitors in the GPU market to spice things up, because that would result in the best pricing and honestly a technological advancement for consumers. All right, user KJ5 asks, what's my opinion about the GPU market when the most hated card for 2023, which they say is the 4070 Ti, actually has the best value at the moment? I actually don't think the 4070 Ti has the best value at the moment. Remember, value is a relative term. Value compared to what? Its competition is gone. No more 3080s, no more 3080 Ti's, no more 3090s, no more 3090 Ti's, gone. So it doesn't have a lot of competition right now at that price point, about $800, other than the 7900 XTX and about $700 for the 6950 XT. That being said, I actually think there's incredible value in this GPU market right now, but it's at the $200 to $500 range. It's the 6650 XT, 6700 XT, it's the Arc A750. It's those cards that are 1440p up to almost 4K capable, super high frame rates for a lot of these games, and they're so inexpensive compared to what came before them. They're almost double the price to performance of previous generation cards, if we just compare what they're going for now versus what those cards sold for during their lifetime. 2070 Super really never got any lower than about $500, and a 6650 XT will just mop the floor with it right now. So I actually think there is really good value in the GPU market, unless you're looking at the high end. Now we'll have to see what the new, we're waiting for the 4070 announcement, should be any day now. We're waiting for 7800 XT, 7800 non-XT GPU announcements. So we'll see where it goes. But right now, there is great value in the market. You just have to look for it under $500. We got a lot of great questions about DDR5 versus DDR4 and just RAM in general. Let's start off with how the speeds work from Rogue Demon, from Jay Regardio, from Rupert Plays. Really good questions on this. Now, if you haven't watched it, we do have a best RAM for gaming video. We actually break all this down in great detail. Check out the link in the video description if you want a deeper dive on it. Basically, the way it works is the first number in the RAM, whether it's DDR4 or DDR5, is the speed of the RAM. The second number that comes afterwards, it's often CL or C, like C16, CL16. That's how much stuff it can get done in one of its cycles. So the first number is how many cycles it can do per second, and then the other number is how much stuff it gets done in one cycle. So you could have RAM that has a lot of cycles, but doesn't get a lot done in one of those cycles. So even though the first number, the speed, is higher on like 4800 DDR5 memory, so CL40, it's not getting as much done as the DDR4 3600 CL16 RAM. Remember, CL16 versus CL40, that's the difference right there. DDR4 RAM effectively gets more done in a single clock cycle than the DDR5 does, even though the DDR5 RAM is spinning faster. Rogue Demon asks a really good follow-up question, which is you basically used to recommend DDR4 3200 CL16 as kind of the sweet spot in terms of price to performance, where it didn't really make a lot of sense to spend any extra money going up to 3600 CL16. Now, no, since I used to give that advice, the price of DDR4 RAM has completely collapsed, and basically at this point, I think DDR4 3600 CL16 does make sense. But what's that equivalent in terms of DDR5 now? And I have to tell you, I'm not sure. It's too early to make that determination. I think we need to do a lot more testing. In terms of Intel on their platforms, I don't think it makes sense to go DDR5. Period, unless you're spending all the money on a super high-end gaming system and you're willing to shell out quite a bit of dough on very, very fast RAM kits because you've already gotten the fastest GPU. Makes more sense still to spend that money getting a better graphics card, go DDR4 3600 CL16, super cheap, spend that money on other things. On the AMD side, since Ryzen 7000 is effectively only DDR5, yeah, I was really hoping that we could find a much more price to performance sweet spot in there. For some reason, a lot of the boards do not like the 5600 stuff I was previously recommending. Some of the boards I have do, but some of the other ones I'm hearing don't. And motherboard quality in terms of their ability to post RAM, even with the same CPU, has been kind of all over the place with Ryzen 7000. Reminds me a lot of the Ryzen 1000 days when it just seemed kind of incomprehensible why some RAM worked and others didn't. I would probably recommend right now, especially if you're going to build like a 7800X3D system, go ahead and spend the extra money and get the 6000 CL30 kits that they were recommending, that they were sending reviewers, the Triton EOZ stuff. It's like $150 for 32 gigabytes. So that does seem to make some sense. If you're doing a 7600, I'm going to do more RAM testing and I'm going to come up with some better kind of budget recommendations for that. I just don't have them at this time. Wasabi and Shubhamnemi, why do people typically go 2 sticks, especially with DDR5? Honestly, it's because 12th gen and 13th gen Intel have had a really rough time running 4 sticks of RAM at the same time. 4 sticks is harder on the memory controller than 2. It's basically you have 2 channels, so you can either have 1 stick of RAM in each channel, that's 2 sticks total, or you can have 2 sticks of RAM in each channel. For some reason, the memory controllers on 11th and 12th generation Intel for DDR5 haven't been able to do that configuration very reliably. 12th generation almost never could. 13th gen still very patchy. Ryzen 7000 has been able to do the 4 sticks okay. That being said, RAM compatibility in kind of a larger sense for DDR5 on Ryzen 7000 has also been a little bit more challenging. I would recommend you just focus on getting 2 sticks. Get 2 sticks. That should take care of you, and typically it's even cheaper. Let's talk about motherboards. Vermilion Justice asked basically if what separates entry levels from a mid-range board is primarily the audio codec on it. Couldn't I just get an external audio device instead and then buy that entry-level board? Sure, absolutely you could. It's not that bad. There is a discernible difference if you're going to use nice speakers though for the upgraded audio codec. So typically like the ALC 897 is the entry-level audio codec. We want to see at least in like an ALC 1200, 1220, ALC 4080, those kind of audio codecs are kind of upgraded ones. But you certainly could get a digital device and add that on. Now that being said, what are the other features that you're often going to get with those motherboards? Well, one of those features, you're going to get more rear USB connectivity with upgraded motherboards, probably more solid VRMs. That being said, I think VRMs are completely rock solid. I think the board partners just got tired of all the videos showing one of their boards burning up and they said, no more, we are just going to overbuild those VRMs. So that's not really been an issue. The number of M.2 drives has also skyrocketed now that there's more PCIe, was faster. It's PCIe Gen 5 for the internal lanes on the motherboards. So overall, there's not a lot that now separates those kind of higher end boards from the more entry level ones. It's primarily the audio. And then there's a couple of niche features like, does it have a postcode, which is nice for debugging and things like that. Maybe it's got better memory traces to it. But these features are kind of increasingly niche. And it used to be there was a big difference between a lower end kind of entry level board and a mid-range board and then a high-end board, but it's really gotten compressed over the last couple of years. All right, we got great questions about AM4 versus AM5. Should you be investing in AM5 over AM4 or Intel for that matter? From Aborts87 and 2138 Dude, I love the name. Let's start off with how long we expect AM4 to last. Look, the physical motherboards will last for decades, so that's not going to be a problem. They should last a very long time. So if you're building a Ryzen 5600 gaming system today with like an RX 6650 XT or an RTX 3060 or an Intel Arc A750, yeah, you'll be able to upgrade that graphics card. No problem. You'll be able to drop a 5800X 3D, probably pick one up pretty cheap in the future. I think that AM4 platform still has a lot of life left. 3600 CL16 RAM's super cheap right now. And I think AM4 still really viable at the budget and the mid-range. I would only focus on Ryzen 7000 at the higher end. If I've got a graphics card like a 6800 XT, RTX 4070 Ti, 7900 XT, those kind of graphics cards, then I'm going to make the jump up. And I'm probably going to jump right over the 5800X 3D, and I would go with Ryzen 7000 for AM5 because I know that in the future I will be able to drop in a CPU upgrade into that same motherboard. My one big hesitation on this, and I'll be able to use, in theory at least, the DDR5 RAM. My two big hesitations, I should say, on going Ryzen 7000 to lock into AM5 platform, for future CPU upgradability, is that I feel like the speeds that we're seeing from DDR5 are increasing so rapidly that whatever DDR5 you buy today will feel like it's a Model T. It'll feel like a piece of junk in 2 to 3 years because the speeds are advancing so quickly with it. You'll feel like you're going to be forced to buy new RAM anyway. So I don't think the RAM is going to be a savings. Then I wonder, will the boards be able to run that fast RAM? Now the memory controller's on the CPU, so with upgraded CPUs, and upgraded memory controllers for DDR5, maybe you'll get, faster RAM. I thought AM5, the future upgradability, would be a bigger selling point. The other thing, let's just be honest, AMD is only committed publicly to the AM5 platform through 2025 plus. Like, what does that even mean? At least with AM4, they committed to, I think, 3 or 4 generations. They're basically committing to 1 more generation and then we'll see. Well, that's what Intel does. So why should I buy AM5? I'm not saying that they're not going to do it. I think that they probably will, but they haven't said publicly that they're going to do it. So they're clearly leaving themselves an out just in case. And if they're leaving themselves an out, they're thinking about whether or not they're going to abandon AM5 after 2 generations. I think possibly Ryzen, especially if you're going to build a 7800X 3D gaming system that's coming down the pike right now, 2 years from now, are you really going to want to upgrade that CPU? It doesn't really seem like it. So I'm really wondering about, I think maybe we have overblown a little bit the future upgradability of AM5. And I'm not saying it's not a selling point at all. I'm just saying maybe it's not the huge selling point that we thought it was. We got a lot of great questions about CPU and GPU bottlenecks. I know this is something that really flummoxes so many folks out there. I totally understand. So let's start off with Icepal Adrian, who basically says, can I explain how CPU bottlenecks work? They have a Ryzen 5900X. They want to get a faster GPU. They're wondering what they should be doing. Well, first of all, we have a whole video that goes into the CPU and GPU combos, including how the bottlenecks work and what combos that you should be looking at. Now that's a 2022 video. I'll leave a link to it down in the video description. We will be updating it for 2023. We're just waiting for some more CPUs to come out, a little bit more memory testing, which is a little bit more data out there, and of course some new graphics cards launches as well. But here's how it works in a nutshell. You want your graphics card to be doing all of the work it can. You want it to be 100% utilization out there. And that typically means you want to play at a high enough resolution so it can render as many frames. And the CPU here, if this thing is rendering so many frames, let's say we turn it all the way down to 1080p, it's an RTX 4090, and it's just so many frames and it's so much driver overhead, the CPU might actually struggle to keep up. So upgrading the CPU in this scenario, or possibly increasing the speed of the RAM, which would help the CPU kind of more quickly compute the things it needs to do, might help us get more frames out of our GPU. That's basically how the CPU bottleneck works. Now, as we go up in resolution, if all of a sudden now we're at 4K, this thing is now not rendering as many frames as it was at 1080p. Higher resolution, it has to render a lot more pixels, so that's far fewer frames. And now all of a sudden the overhead on this CPU, the RAM speed and everything, not as intense. In fact, we might find that something like a Ryzen 5600 may perform the same as the 76, almost the same as the 7600 with a similar graphics card if we turn the resolution way, way up. Now that being said, there typically is a little bit of a differentiation between newer architecture and older architecture, especially as it relates to the amount of cache on the CPUs. Cache really more than cores and threads. Assassin Jove 1339 asks, if they play CPU intensive games like Factorio, are you better off looking at productivity builds or should you look at like the X3D CPUs? Well, we have found in those super like Factorio, super CPU intensive games that they really love cache. They absolutely just devour cache and they really like the Vcache CPUs. So yes, I would look at a Vcache CPU. Just know that if you're not at an RTX 4090 already, then upgrading the GPU will typically return you more frames than upgrading the CPU will. Just the way it works, as long as you're going up a tier, not kind of a side grade. We also have to ask ourselves, in these games, how many frames do you actually need? Is there a reason to get 240 FPS at 1080p when you could turn that up to 4K and get 60 or 70 FPS instead? Wouldn't you rather have the higher quality, better details rather than rendering a whole lot of frames? It's not a first-person shooter. The reaction time probably doesn't make any difference whatsoever in terms of the frame. Gotta ask ourselves, like at what point do we just not need any more frames? And what we need is more detail, higher resolution, and better details. All right, Haroon Malik asks, are 4 cores, 8 threads still enough for gaming in 2023? Their examples of 1200F Or should you look for at least 6 cores like the 2600, 3600, 4500? Well, not only I think is the 1200F a great gaming CPU in 2023 at the budget level, at least even up to 1440p, I think it stomps on those CPUs that you just listed. It's actually going to be far faster in gaming than a 6-core CPU. Jason, I thought more cores, more threads equal better gaming. No, there's also frequency. There's how many clock cycles you got. So the 1200F, yes, it only has 4 cores. Those 4 cores are so more performative than the cores on the 2600 or 3600. They're just older architecture. It uses the cache better. I think in many cases, it actually has more cache than the 2600. Let me know down in the comments if I'm just misremembering that off the top of my head. But the 1200F is an amazing gaming CPU, and out of the CPUs you listed, that's the one that I would go with. We haven't just advanced cores, we've also advanced how fast the cores are and how much stuff the cores get done on a per clock basis. And then we've also cranked the clock cycles way up on them too. It used to be you could use kind of cores and threads as a very simple rubric, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and say, okay, this CPU will probably outperform that CPU. But we've come so far since the 4-core days where that's all Intel would give us. I think 4 cores, 8 threads, as long as they're modern ones like the 12100F, 13100F, are more than capable. That being said, even a CPU like the Ryzen 5600 does pick up, and it picks up maybe not because of the cores, but because of frequency and other things, about 10% over the 1200F. So yes, there's a continuum. I would look at testing, and I would no longer look at just how many cores and threads it has as a kind of simple rubric. All right, let's get into the speed round here. User R5UN asks, do we already have a website? Will we be starting one? We kind of more of a blog approach. This is something that we definitely have considered. Let me know down in the comments if that's something that you're interested in. It's something we are heavily considering right now. Muaxa asks, what are the specs of my current gaming PC and editing PC? Well, I basically have 2 PCs that I use, and then my wife has an editing PC. So the PC that's actually sitting next to me, we built this in 2021. This is our Ryzen 5600X build. I'll leave a link to this video down in the video description. Absolutely love building it. It's got a Ryzen 5600X and it's got an RTX 3060 Ti. We use this for video capture. In fact, the video that's going on right now, this is being captured on this PC right now using OBS. We've done that for years at this point. We also have in the living room, the gaming PC that I typically play on has a Ryzen 5600X and right now an RTX 3070, and it's hooked up to a 4K LG C1 OLED TV. We have a lot of fun with, mostly play World of Warcraft, but also Overwatch and things like that on that. And then of course we've got a Ryzen 5950X video editing PC, but that whole rig is due for an upgrade. I'll leave a link to all of those builds down in the video description. More speed round questions. We've got user DI10T says, can they use an old power supply that's 10 years old for their new gaming PC? I would recommend strongly against it. PSUs have a lot of components in them that do take a lot of wear and tear, and their effective lifespan is less than 10 years. So I would go ahead and get a new one. If you're looking for a new PSU, check out our best PSU buying guide. I'll leave that link to that down in the video description. We go through what you need to be focused on and what PSU you should be buying. And here's a spoiler alert, forget the 80 plus efficiency. It's not just 80 gold. There's other things to go into it, so check that out. Blue Shadow asks, does only the GPU matter when upgrading to higher resolution monitor like 1440p from 1080p, even if you have a pretty good CPU? Yes. The GPU is far and away the most important component if you want to upgrade or if you want to add more monitors. So what's becoming increasingly popular are 2 and 3 monitor setups, especially at 1440p. If you're going to use all 3 of those for the game and kind of widen your field of view like that, then yes, that is going to require higher end GPU hardware in order to keep that going. Remember, if you got value out of the video, give it a like because it makes a huge difference to the channel, especially this guy right here. And of course, subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Speaking of cool content, did you miss our How to Build a PC in 2023 video? Don't worry, you can check it out right here. We go through everything that you need to know to build a PC in 2023. And we'll catch you on the next one.